Thank you so much. So I'd really like to thank ANCATL and in particular the two Georges for envisaging and facilitating this Deep Time Symposium. I know that when I was creating this unit 5 years ago, it would have been fantastic to begin with this symposium because I feel very inspired. It's been a real privilege as well to listen to the experienced teachers who've gone before me, and I'm really looking forward to hearing from the esteemed panelists who are to follow. So this afternoon, I come to you from beautiful Ngunnawal country, and I would like to pay my respects to Ngunnawal elders past and present, the original teachers of this land. I'd like to share with you our Deep Time Australia unit that we've created for our Year 7 students. I'll briefly speak about our history mystery case study, our process for working with and learning from Indigenous community elders, and I'll share some of the ways we're embedding Indigenous pedagogies into our classrooms that are hopefully transferable to a number of different contexts. So I would like to acknowledge that this presentation contains the images of deceased persons as well. Okay, so we thought it was important to build a RACTDDP, which is an acronym that I have developed myself. It is a rich, authentic and collaborative deep time program. And what this means is that we are going to create a case study and contact the relevant Indigenous nations to make sure that we are being collaborative and that we can create something really authentic. We are going to use the 8 Ways Indigenous Pedagogies framework, which we've really enjoyed exploring. And we are thinking about, of course, version 9 of the Australian curriculum coming out and trying to make sure that we are connecting really closely with the skills and content of version 9 Deep Time. So research tells us that in order to make authentic, meaningful learning experiences for our kids, we should make strong links to the land. And as we've heard this morning from Kath and Pete's really inspiring presentation, we need to make it local and land-based. So our wonderful head of department, Alex Thompson, he rediscovered for us the case of 2 7,000-year-old Narragaow ancestors who are buried with grave goods near Cooma. So Cooma is, I don't know if you can see my pointer, but actually Cooma is on the map, which is pretty cool. And then we're just up here in Canberra in Ngunnawal country. So we're talking about Narragaow country, but we're neighbours. And Cooma was actually the birthplace of Canberra Grammar School, which is where I teach, before it was relocated brick by brick to Canberra. So it seemed like a really accessible and very relevant case study for our school context. Okay, so the story of our find, this is where I felt most comfortable because this was in the research and this was in the archaeology and the history. And I went into the archives, went to Trove, which I loved. And in 1991, they found at this creek, Rockflat Creek, some remains, and they didn't know who these remains belonged to. And over time, we slowly start to figure out what's going on here. So we think perhaps they might be colonial skeletons. We're not quite sure, maybe just one. But then a year later, we discover actually what we've got here are potentially a 10,000-year-old burial, but later carbon dated to 7,000-year-old burial of 2 Narragaow ancestors. And alongside them was found this incredible kangaroo tooth necklace with 364 incised, like little holes in them, teeth from wallaby and kangaroos. And so this is like a really rare find. They've only found 3 kangaroo tooth necklaces like this in Australia. So really interesting for the students. And then as we begin to explore the case study, we see that we've also got some sort of jaw bones being used potentially for a tool. We've got some bone points. We can see these the incised holes really clearly in the kangaroo tooth. We've got an ochre-lined burial. We've got some sort of rock tool artifacts. We're not quite sure what's going on, but there's lots to discover in this history mystery that we are, the students get really interested in. And another aspect of this case study is the reburial. So I guess there are two parts. The first part is this redemption story for landholders. So this case study was found on farmer Jim's property. We're not sure who Jim is, and we're not sure who where the farm is. It's remained under wraps for good reason. But farmer Jim, he finds these remains. He allows for the authorities and the archaeologists to come in and undertake their digs, and then he allows for the reburial on his property as well. So Gabu Ted Thomas comes, and he is a really important Yuin Indigenous leader, and he conducts the reburial of these bones. So the story is really interesting because there's so many different aspects that we can explore. And then, of course, we have our 364 incisor teeth, which give insight into the complexity of the cultures of those living on the Monero Plains, which is what we're discussing. And these grave goods also give us a sense of, what daily life was like on the Monero Plains 7,000 years ago. We have actually teed up with the department, and we're going to get 364 of these teeth 3D printed so that students can come along and recreate what they think this is, what they think this might be, because we have it. And Angela, who was a paleontologist who worked on this dig, she was also an artist, and she thought that it might be a necklace, but we want to give these to the students and have them decide what they could be. So in creating this course, we went to a number of different people. So Ani Teresa Webster is a Narragansett elder, and she is just the font of all knowledge, and she is incredible. And I found her through a super roundabout route. I joined the local Narragansett Facebook page, and then I asked around and was able to find her. And then she contacted me, said, yes, we're meeting in Jindabyne. Would you like to come down? And so I got to be a part of their awesome community meeting and see what they're doing. And then that sparked our journey. So I also was able to get in contact with the original archaeologist at the site, Sue Feary, Angela Davis, Colin Pardo. There were so many. It was really fun, actually, to explore all of these different links to different people around this case study. So when we had this case study, we had this beautiful, interesting, engaging, something the students would love, we thought, but what we felt were lots of feelings that we have discussed a lot today. The draft report on Indigenous Research Project conducted by Tyson Junker-Porter came up with, interviewed many teachers, and some of the common things that were said were, we're threatened by Aboriginal content because we don't know the rules. And there is a fear of offending people or saying something that's not right. And this fear and these feelings were very common in our department. We're all non-Indigenous educators, and so this was a common feeling. And so on the one hand, it was comforting to see that other people were feeling the same thing. But on the other hand, it really did spur us into action. This was a call to action. Because what we then saw was Margot Neal, the marvelous Margot Neal, editor of the Songlines series. And she writes, many educators feel nervous about teaching Indigenous subjects, which they feel should be done by Indigenous people. She says, but it has to be taught by teachers whether or not they are Indigenous, because the demand for our cultural knowledge and protocols and understandings means we are spread thin. So we need to be in this space. Non-Indigenous educators need to be in this space, and we need to be working collaboratively and really closely with Indigenous community leaders. So the beautiful thing about making these strong connections with, in our case, Narragansett Nation elders and Indigenous people, meant that we were able to ask the challenging questions, learn the rules, and ask them for advice and guidance, which they were so willing to provide. And as a little tip, it is really important that you establish from the outset expectations of honorariums, fees that you might pay to them. And this is where your Indigenous liaison officer can really come into their own at your school. So it took 9 months from when I first made contact with the Narragansett Nation Board to when we were able to launch our new unit. And my biggest piece of advice to anyone planning on embarking on this journey is to be patient and to approach it with an open mind. So I want to share with you now our unit in a little bit more depth. Cool, I've got time. So conceptually, these are very complex ideas. When we think about continuity and change in the ancient Mediterranean, as we heard Kelly and Lee discuss, and I absolutely loved your comparative timeline, and I saw in the chat that everybody was absolutely loving it as well. So thank you for sharing. But in the Mediterranean, we're thinking of tens and hundreds of years, and in deep time, we're thinking in terms of thousands of years. And for 12-year-olds, this is certainly a real challenge. In the conversations I've had with colleagues and other educators, there seem to be well, there are lots of useful approaches, but two big useful approaches. So the one I was talking about with Dr. Louisa Marty, who is really big in this space, she's an excellent source of knowledge, and she just did an interview with the New South Wales HTA, which is on YouTube and well worth exploring on Deep Time. And she said one of the ways you can approach it is by picking out all of the really engaging topics for kids. So rapid environmental change, megafauna, some of the fabulous sites, Budj Bim and their eel traps. And so you can go down that path of just pulling out the best bits, the most engaging bits. Or, I mean, there are so many different ways, or you could go down the route of choosing one of those brilliant case studies that have already been developed, Narrabeen Man, Mungo Man and Lady, this history mystery style. And this is what we did. We liked the idea of going deep into one case study and then thinking about all of the different ways in which we could draw out elements of the version 9 Australian curriculum. So thinking from these ancestral remains, we were able to think about their roles in society. We've got an older woman with a younger man. So who are these two people who are being buried together and what might their roles have been? We can think about social organisation. Oh, my picture's in the way. What's that one say? Oh, yeah, environmental challenges, absolutely. So in the Holocene period, one of the older woman who was discovered, she had stress lines in her bones, which showed that there might have been periods of starvation while she was growing. And so that's a really interesting thing to look at. We've got, food and agriculture. Thinking about continuing culture. So ochre, the grave has evidence that it was actually ochre lined. And so thinking about how we see ochre lined graves and the use of ochre in different artistic contexts as well for 65,000 years. Thinking about trade, so how red ochre that was found in the grave was obviously not from the Cooma area. So what is going on here in terms of trade and contact with other nations? Thinking about conserving culture and heritage sites and thinking about this collaboration between traditional owners and research. This case study was absolutely, gold for debates about this. Funerary customs and thinking about unauthorized disturbance of remains as well. So there were so many different, and this is just a couple of ways that we tapped into version 9. And then finally, I want to show you the 8 ways framework. So this was introduced to me when we were starting the unit, and I have really enjoyed exploring the different ways to think about this. So it's a framework developed by educators, by the traditional owners of Western New South Wales, and it can be used by anyone to work with Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal students. we have used the 8 Ways framework to help us to incorporate Indigenous ways of learning into the ways we teach our lessons. So community links, which we've heard of today, story sharing, learning maps, symbols and images, land links. These are some of the things that I'll show you in our case study that we're doing. So the way that we start this course is with a brainstorming task. And I think the circle is a really lovely shape to start our brainstorming. And we have some beautiful examples of what students already know or already think about when they think about deep time and Indigenous culture. And something that is on the 8 Ways website, which is a great resource, is this idea of creating a visual planning map. So we move from studying deep time Australia to studying ancient Greece to studying ancient China, and having the image of the bird. So for the Narragansett culture, the crow is really important animal, and obviously in Greece, we have the owl, and thinking about how the bird moves throughout our unit is kind of a nice way, a different way to connect ideas rather than just, normal chronology or themes that we go to as history teachers. We then move on to the NMA has a fantastic activity that gets you to think about the movement of people to Sahul, to the ancient continent of Sahul, and they've got these great maps and questions that you can do as well. So highly recommend that. One that we absolutely love is story sharing, and there is a brilliant story by Auntie Rachel Muller, who's a Monero Narragansett elder, and she tells the story of her learning walk. So as a young child, she would walk from Kosciuszko, 350 kilometres to Twofold Bay, and it's a remarkable walk, and a walk that you can imagine would have been taking place 7,000 years ago as well, because in our context, the bogong moth is really important in the Kosciuszko area. And so many nations would congregate in the Kosciuszko area to all feast on these bogong moths, and then they would disperse as well. So you can imagine that this would be another example of continuing culture and use of resources. And she tells this story, and the students absolutely love it. We sit in silence and they take a spot on the floor and they just enjoy listening. I sat by the fire thinking of my people who walked each year to the place where the water rolls over and back again, and they get to imagine the story. So it's a great way of bringing Indigenous voices. I'll skip through this. We have like a survivor task as well, which is kind of interesting. They have to pick a whole bunch of cards and pick out 12 of them. What would they need to survive on this learning walk? So that's kind of fun. And then, of course, there are so many different things that we can explore just from this one story that we can imagine maybe our Narragansett people who we study might have gone on this walk as well. Okay, I got to click through all of my version 9 links. I'll share this. There's a lot. We do some dating. What else? Oh, we invited the Narragansett Nation elders to be part of students' learning. So that was fantastic. And they agreed to have their ideas recorded so that we've got that for future. So we just can use that each time we teach it. We're really lucky. We've got the NMA right next to us. And so they had the Living Culture exhibition on. They have now the Great Southern Land exhibition, which is brilliant. And they've also got some little 30-minute sessions where you can do hands-on sessions with Indigenous tools, which is useful as well for students. I love hands-on things. This is a pretty gross picture, sorry, but what it did produce was some of the artifacts that were found. So I got my friend who shoots roos, and he got these bone scrapers, and we melted them down and got off all the meat. And now we can show these to the students and think about, well, how nicely do these fit in the hand and what do you think that these might have been used for? And so that experimental archaeology is something that the students really enjoy. And then we also have, I save some of the incisor teeth from the kangaroos as well. And I give them a sharp rock every time and we try to see if we can make any indent whatsoever on the teeth. And we find it's incredibly difficult. And so we've taught it 8 times now. And I think you can barely see there's a scratch. So that's getting them to think about tools, technology, and art and symbols and creativity. There's so many different paths that you can explore just from handing around 2 teeth. We also had a head archaeologist come and visit us as well, which was really cool. She made the way all the way from the South Coast for us. Okay, the final thing that I want to talk about, I've got a lot of slides after this, but I think we'll finish here, is that I think we started this conversation this morning with Georgia saying that many of us left school and university with only a cursory knowledge of deep time Australia and Indigenous culture. And so we see it at Canberra Grammar School as part of our responsibility as well to educate our wider community. So as part of one of our activities is parent prep, and students have to create an A4 task for their parents. So it's really flexible what they want to do. It could be they're creating a text for their parents. It could be some multi-choice questions. They might have to annotate a picture, similar to the tasks that they're doing in school. But it means that they go home and it sparks conversation with their parents. I often get parents emailing me saying, I'm sorry, I couldn't get my prep done. Prep is homework here. I couldn't get my homework done. Can you give me a little bit of extra time? I'm like, yeah, sure, no worries. So that's something that I've really enjoyed and we've enjoyed doing here as a school. And I also have, what's the time? Okay, I have some interesting things that I'll just click through so you know what's here. That a shout out, I guess, to the WIPSI conference, the World Indigenous Peoples Conference on Education. I shouldn't have had conference there, which is happening in November and it's in Auckland. And I went 3 years ago and it was the most inspiring event that I ever attended. So there's still time to book if you want to go to the WIPSI conference. And I also run a page called Teaching Deep Time Australia. Georgia, I hope it's okay that I'm sharing this one. So if you would like to come along and join us on Facebook to keep the conversations going. Okay, thank you.